The snow came sideways that morning, driven hard by the wind, thick as smoke off a gun barrel. Margaret Hartwell pulled her shawl tighter, squinting through the white blur. The wagon creaked beneath her, its axles stiff from cold. The horse stumbled once, snorted, and kept on. 3 days since she'd seen another soul on the trail, just snow, ski, and the endless moan of the plains. In the back, her boy Danny slept beneath a patched blanket, his breath fogging in the frozen air. 9 years old, too young to be this thin, too old to believe her stories about spring. When the wagon's right wheel cracked against a hidden rock, the sound cut through the wind like a gunshot. The horse reared, and the wagon lurched sideways into a drift. Margaret fought the reins, but the animal froze, steam rising from its nostrils, eyes rolling white. The wheel was split clean through. She sat there, heart pounding, staring into the white. No road anymore, no direction, just the world swallowing itself in snow. 6 months ago, her husband had died of influenza, leaving her with $47 in debts and 2 children. 3 months after that, her daughter Emma, only 4 years old, had stopped breathing in the night. No money for the doctor, no food to keep her strong. Margaret had buried her daughter in frozen ground behind the house they'd already lost to the bank. Then through the flurry, she saw it, a shape against the hill, gray and angular, half buried in drifts. A house. Her voice came out rough when she shook Danny's shoulder. "Wake up, son. We found something." He stirred, blinking against the cold. "A town?" "Not quite, but it's got a roof." They left the wagon where it sank and trudged uphill. The snow reached Margaret's knees, biting through her skirts. The closer they came, the clearer it grew. A 2-story house with a wide porch, its boards warped by years of wind. The windows were dark, the chimney choked with ice, but the structure still stood tall, proud even in ruin. The door gave when she pushed it, stiff but not locked. Inside was silence, the kind that had weight to it. The air smelled of wood rot, dust, and faintly of smoke long gone. A stove sat in the corner, black with soot. A single chair lay overturned beside it, half buried in snow that had blown in through a broken pane. Danny clung to her coat. "Is anyone here?" Margaret listened. Only the wind answered, whistling through the rafters. "Not anymore, but we can be for now." She closed the door behind them, sealing out most of the storm. Her fingers ached from cold. The stove was old iron, the kind made back east, heavy, stubborn, reliable. Her father had worked iron in Missouri before the cholera took him. He used to say metal remembered kindness, if you spoke to it right. She knelt, opened the stove's belly, and found old ashes clinging like ghosts to the sides. "Maybe you'll breathe again," she murmured, reaching for her match tin. 2 left. She struck one, and the flare, weak and sputtering, caught the edge of some dry splinters from the porch rail. Flame spread slow, then steady. Danny crouched beside her, eyes wide. "It's working. It's remembering. We just needed to remind it." By nightfall, the room had warmed enough for breath to vanish in the air. They ate the last of their jerky and coffee, sitting close to the stove. Outside, the wind screamed down the valley, shaking the shutters. Inside, the sound softened to a hum, almost like the house was singing under its breath. When Danny fell asleep, Margaret walked the hall with her lantern. Wallpaper peeled in curling strips, floors bowed but solid. The place hadn't been abandoned long, 10 years, maybe 15 at most. Upstairs, she found a room where the ceiling hadn't caved. A child's toy horse sat on a dusty shelf, one wheel missing. She turned it in her hands, then set it back carefully, as if afraid to wake something. But there was another detail that caught her eye, something that made her skin prickle. On the small table beside the toy, a tin cup sat upright, as if someone had just set it down. The dust around it showed a clear circle where it had rested undisturbed for years, but the cup itself was clean on one side, as though fingers had gripped it recently. She descended the stairs slowly, the lantern casting long shadows. In the main room, Danny slept curled against the warmth. The stove crackled softly, but now she noticed what she'd missed before. The overturned chair had drag marks in the dust leading to it, and near the broken window, boot prints in the blown snow were too fresh, too sharp-edged to be old. Someone had been here, recently. Margaret set the lantern down and checked the shotgun beside the door. 3 shells left. She'd used the fourth to scare off a vagrant 2 towns back. 3 shells to protect her born in a house that wasn't hers, in a storm that showed no signs of ending. She sat in the darkness watching the door until exhaustion dragged her under. The next morning, the storm had eased, leaving the world white and blinding. She checked the barn, half collapsed, but the roof held in one corner. Enough space for the horse and what was left of their supplies. The well still worked after she broke the ice on its mouth, and the water came up clear and shockingly cold. Danny helped carry their few belongings from the wagon. A bundle of clothes, a pot, 2 plates, the shotgun, and a leather satchel that held the only photograph of Emma. Margaret couldn't look at it without feeling something crack inside her chest. They spent the day making the house habitable. She nailed boards over the broken window. Danny swept snow from the corners. They found a woodpile behind the barn, enough for 2 weeks if they were careful. The stove became their heart, glowing steady, its warmth spreading through the walls like veins waking under skin. That evening, while Danny dozed by the fire, Margaret stepped out onto the porch. The snow glowed blue under the moon. In the distance, a dark speck moved along the frozen road, slow, steady, deliberate. A rider. She tensed, hand on the shotgun beside the door. The figure dismounted at the gate, brushing snow from his coat. His beard was silver, his hat rimmed with frost. Didn't reckon I'd ever see smoke from this place again. His voice carried low and calm. You folks move in? Just passing through. He nodded slowly, studying her with eyes that had seen more winters than most. This here was the Whitmore place. Folks used to call it the cold house after Jacob Whitmore froze one winter when the stove failed him. Been empty ever since. Margaret looked back toward the glow of the stove inside. It's warm now. The man smiled faintly. Reckon that's something worth seeing. Name's Thomas Sterling. I drive the mail run out of Dust Creek. If you need anything, wood, salt, lamp oil, you leave word at the post house. I ride this way every 5 days. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small brass key. Found this in the depot safe years ago. Used to open that barn door yonder. Figure it belongs home. Margaret took it, surprised by the kindness in his eyes. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. He tipped his hat. Ain't no thanks needed. Just be careful. Houses like this remember things. Some good, some best left resting. Mr. Sterling, she called as he turned to mount his horse. The wolves, are they bad this year? His expression darkened. Worse than I've seen in 20 years. Lost 3 head of cattle last week. You keep that shotgun close, Mrs. Hartwell, Margaret Hartwell. Mrs. Hartwell, you got enough ammunition? 3 shells. He was quiet for a moment, then reached into his saddlebag. Take these. He handed her a small box. 12 more. You're going to need them before winter's done. When he rode off, the snow whispered over his trail until it vanished. Margaret stood there for a while, watching her breath rise into the cold sky, feeling the weight of the ammunition in her hands like a promise of violence to come. She went back inside. Danny stirred awake as she sat beside him. Was someone here, Ma? Just a rider. Said this house used to be called the Cold House. Maybe we can make it the warm one, he mumbled sleepily, curling closer to her. Margaret smiled into the firelight. Maybe we can. But sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind carried the phantom howl of something hungry in the dark. On the 3rd night, the wolves came. Margaret woke to a sound like gravel dragging across wood. She sat up, pulse hammering. The stove still glowed, casting orange light across the room. Danny slept on, undisturbed. But there it was again, scraping, circling. She grabbed the shotgun and moved to the window. 6 pairs of eyes gleamed back at her from the yard, reflecting the moon. The wolves circled the barn where the horse whinnied in terror. They were massive, their fur thick and matted, ribs showing through their winter coats. Margaret raised the shotgun and fired into the air. The blast shattered the night. The wolves scattered, but only to the tree line. They didn't leave. They just watched, patient and hungry. Danny woke crying. Mama, it's all right, baby. It's all right. But it wasn't. 2 shells left, and 6 wolves that now knew there was meat here, warm and vulnerable. She stayed awake until dawn, shotgun across her lap. The wolves melted into the forest with the sunrise, but their tracks ringed the house in a perfect noose. The fourth day brought no relief. Margaret found the woodpile half depleted. At this rate, they'd freeze before the week was out. She couldn't leave Danny alone to search for more wood, and she couldn't take him into the forest where the wolves waited. That night, while searching the pantry for anything edible, she noticed a loose panel near the back wall. She pried it open and found a small wooden chest covered in dust. Its hinges groaned when she lifted the lid. Inside were folded papers tied with a faded blue ribbon. Letters. The first was dated 1836. The ink had bled in places, but the handwriting was elegant, deliberate. "My dearest Clara," it began, "the snow has set in early this year. The cattle are thin, the fields asleep. Yet when I see the lamplight in your window, I swear this land feels less empty. If ever these walls grow cold, I pray someone will remember the warmth we built here." Margaret read the letter twice, her throat tightening. The next few were the same, short notes, all written by Jacob Whitmore to his wife. Some spoke of storms, others of loneliness, all of love. The final one was dated the winter she died. "I lit every lamp, Clara, every single one. Still the dark came in. I'll keep the fire burning till you come home." Margaret closed the box gently, her hands trembling. When Danny woke the next morning, she told him the story of the letters as they ate breakfast, thin porridge made from the last of their flour. His eyes widened. So they loved each other even after? Even after. Some things don't freeze easy. But love didn't stop wolves or fill empty bellies. That afternoon, Margaret made a decision. She took the last piece of jerky, walked 50 yards from the house, and staked it to the ground. Then she climbed into the hayloft of the barn with a shotgun and waited. The sun crawled toward the horizon. Cold seeped through her coat. Her fingers grew numb on the trigger. Danny was inside, alone, with orders to bar the door and not open it for anyone but her. As twilight bled across the snow, they came. 7 of them now, not 6. A new one, larger than the rest, led the pack. They circled the bait, wary. The big one sniffed the air, ears flat. Margaret steadied her breathing. 50 yards. She'd hunted deer at this distance before, when she still had a husband and a farm. Before the world took everything. The wolf lowered its head to the meat. She fired. The blast echoed across the valley. The wolf dropped, twitching once before going still. The pack exploded in panic, scattering into the trees. But Margaret knew they'd be back. Wolves didn't forget. They adapted. She climbed down and dragged the carcass toward the house, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Danny met her at the door, eyes huge. "Mama, what are we going to do with it?" "We're going to eat it." His face went pale. "But it was going to eat us, Danny. That's how the world works now." She skinned it behind the barn, working fast before the cold stiffened the hide. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from the knowledge of what she'd become. A woman who killed to survive. A mother who'd feed her son wolf meat because there was nothing else. That night, they ate it roasted over the stove. It tasted wild and tough, but it was protein, and protein meant they'd live another day. Danny chewed slowly, tears running down his cheeks, not from the taste, but from understanding. Childhood was burning away in this house, replaced by something harder. "I miss Emma," he whispered. Margaret set down her fork. "Me too, baby. Every day." "Is she in heaven?" "I don't know. I hope so." "Do you think she's cold?" The question broke something in Margaret's chest. She pulled Danny close, feeling his small body shake with sobs. "No, sweetheart. Wherever she is, she's warm. I promise you that." But promises meant nothing in a world this frozen. On the 10th night, the storm returned with a vengeance. Wind howled through the chimney like a living thing. Snow pressed against the windows like fists trying to break through. Margaret fed the stove until her arms ached, but the temperature inside kept dropping. Danny started coughing around midnight. By dawn, he was burning with fever. "Mama, I'm so hot." Margaret pressed her hand to his forehead. At least 103 degrees, maybe more. She had no medicine, no doctor, no way to get help with the roads buried under 6 feet of fresh snow. She stripped him to his undershirt and bathed him with snow melted in a pot. His skin was flushed, his breathing shallow. Memories of Emma's final night crashed over her, drowning rational thought. Not again. Please, God, not again. Danny's eyes rolled back and he started to shake. No, no, no. Margaret held him down, terrified he'd hurt himself in the convulsions. "Stay with me, Danny. Stay with me." His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear over the roar of the storm. She laid him on the floor near the stove and piled every blanket they had on top of him. Then she did the only thing left. She prayed. Words she hadn't spoken since Emma died spilled out of her, desperate and raw. The fever raged through the night. Margaret didn't sleep. She fed the fire and bathed her son and whispered promises into his unhearing ears. If he lived, she'd never ask for anything again. If he lived, she'd be good. She'd be grateful. She'd rebuild whatever God wanted rebuilt. By dawn, the wood was nearly gone. She looked around the room with wild eyes, the overturned chair, the old table, the floorboards that creaked when she walked. She started with the chair, feeding it to the flames piece by piece, then the table, then as she pried up loose floorboards, each one a small prayer, each one buying another hour of heat. Danny's fever broke around noon, his eyes open, clear and focused. "Mama," she collapsed beside him, sobbing so hard no sound came out. His small hand found hers. "I'm okay, Mama. I'm okay." But the house wasn't. The storm had torn shingles from the roof. Water dripped through the ceiling into buckets she'd placed strategically around the room. The wood was gone. In desperation, she'd burned almost all their furniture. That afternoon, while Danny slept fitfully, Margaret stood at the window and watched another storm gather on the horizon. Without wood, without furniture, without any way to keep the fire burning, they had maybe 2 days before the cold took them both. She thought about Jacob Whitmore, dying alone in this house when his stove failed. She thought about Clara, frozen somewhere in the snow. She thought about Emma, buried in ground she'd never see again. And she thought, not for the first time, about giving up, about just lying down beside Danny and letting the cold carry them both away to wherever Emma had gone. But then Danny coughed and shifted in his sleep, and she felt that familiar weight settle onto her shoulders, the weight of being someone's entire world, the weight of being the only thing standing between her child and the dark. She picked up the shotgun, one shell left. "Not yet," she whispered to the empty room, to Jacob's ghost, to God if he was listening. Not yet. Outside, the wind picked up again, and in the distance, wolves howled their hunger to the dying light. The house creaked and settled around her, and for just a moment Margaret could have sworn she heard it sigh, like an old woman remembering better days. The next morning brought a sound that didn't belong to winter. Hoofbeats, muffled by snow, but steady. Margaret grabbed the shotgun and moved to the window. A single rider approached, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. Thomas Sterling. She opened the door before he could knock. He took one look at her face, at the dark circles under her eyes, at Danny sleeping pale and still by the guttering fire, and his expression hardened. "How long since you've eaten?" "Yesterday, maybe the day before." "Wood?" "Gone." He didn't say anything else. Just started unloading the pack horse. Firewood, sacks of flour and beans, salted pork, a bottle of something amber that might have been whiskey. He worked in silence, stacking wood by the stove, organizing supplies on the bare floor where the table used to stand. When he was done, he looked around the stripped room and nodded once. "You did what you had to." Margaret's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I burned the furniture. I was going to start on the walls." "The walls can wait. Let's get this fire built up proper." Within an hour, the house was warming again. Thomas heated water and made coffee, strong and bitter, and the best thing Margaret had tasted in weeks. He examined Danny, felt his forehead, listened to his breathing. "Fever's broken. He'll be weak for a few days, but he'll pull through." "How do you know?" "Had 5 children of my own. Lost 2 to fever, but the other 3 survived worse than this." He poured coffee into a tin cup and pressed it into her hands. "Drink. When's the last time you slept?" "I don't remember." "Then you sleep now. I'll keep watch." "I can't just—" "Mrs. Hartwell." His voice was gentle but firm. "You've been carrying this alone long enough. Let someone else hold it for a few hours." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She lay down beside Danny, pulled a blanket over them both, and fell into darkness. When she woke, it was evening. The fire burned strong and bright. Thomas sat in the corner, whittling something from a piece of scrap wood. Danny was awake, sipping broth from a bowl. Mama, Mr. Sterling made soup. Thomas looked up from his work. It's nothing fancy, just beans and salt pork. But it'll put some strength back in the boy. Margaret sat up slowly, every muscle aching. You didn't have to do all this. No, I suppose I didn't. But a man's got to ride somewhere in weather like this, else he forgets how to move. He held up what he'd been carving, a small horse, perfectly detailed, with 4 wheels this time. Danny's eyes went wide. Is that for me? If you want it, saw the one upstairs was missing a wheel, figured this one might do better. The boy took it with reverence, turning it over in his small hands. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Call me Tom. Mr. Sterling makes me feel older than I already am. They ate together in comfortable silence. Afterward, Tom told them about Dust Creek, the town 8 miles east. A small place, maybe 200 people, but it had a general store, a doctor, even a school. When the thaw comes, he said, looking at Margaret, you should think about heading there. This house, it's solid, but it's lonely, and loneliness will kill you just as sure as the cold. Margaret thought about Jacob's letters, about a man who loved his wife so much he couldn't leave the place where they'd been happy, even after she was gone. Sometimes loneliness is safer than people. Tom's expression softened with understanding. Sometimes, but not for long. He left the next morning, promising to return in 5 days with more supplies. Margaret tried to refuse, but he waved her off. Consider it a loan. When you're back on your feet, you can repay me. Until then, just keep that fire burning. The days after Tom's visit fell into a rhythm. Margaret chopped wood, hauled water, mended what could be mended. Danny grew stronger, his color returning, his laughter coming more easily. The house stopped feeling like a tomb and started feeling like a refuge. But on the 14th night, Margaret woke to a sound that froze her blood. Scratching. Not the aimless pawing of wolves, but deliberate, methodical. Someone trying to get inside. She grabbed the shotgun and moved to the door. Through the gaps in the boards, she saw firelight. Multiple fires. Torches. A voice called out, rough and slurred with drink. We know you're in there. Seen the smoke for days now. You got food in there? Supplies. Margaret's mind raced. One shell. Multiple men. Danny asleep upstairs. There's nothing here, just move on. Laughter, ugly and mean. That's not very neighborly. We just want to talk. Maybe share that fire you got going. I said move on. Or what? You gonna shoot all of us with that old gun? The door shuddered as something heavy hit it. Margaret raised the shotgun, aimed at the center of the door. Her hands were steady. Everything she'd survived had made her steady. The first one through this door gets a belly full of buckshot. The second one gets this fireplace poker through his skull. And the third one? Well, he gets to explain to your mothers why he brought you boys out here to die. Silence, then muttering. Then the torches moved, circling the house. We'll be back, the voice called. Can't stay awake forever. Margaret didn't lower the gun until the lights disappeared into the trees. Then she barred the door with what was left of the table, wedged the poker through the handle, and sat with her back against it. Danny appeared at the top of the stairs. Mama? It's all right, baby. Just some men passing through. Are they coming back? She wanted to lie, to protect him from one more truth, but lies were a luxury they couldn't afford anymore. Maybe, but if they do, we'll be ready. They didn't sleep that night. Margaret taught Danny how to load the shotgun, how to brace it against his shoulders so the recoil wouldn't knock him down. She showed him where to aim, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. He was 9 years old, learning to kill, and she was the one teaching him. When dawn broke without attack, they both sagged with relief. But Margaret knew this wasn't over. Men like that, drunk and desperate and hunting for easy prey, they'd be back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. She needed help. She needed Thomas Sterling. She needed something more than a single shotgun shell and a 9-year-old boy. That afternoon, she saw smoke rising from the trees where the men had camped. They were still out there, watching, waiting. So she did the only thing she could think of. She built a bonfire in the front yard, big enough to be seen for miles. Big enough that Thomas Sterling, on his mail route, couldn't possibly miss it. And then she waited. shotgun in hand, watching the tree line, while Danny huddled inside the house and the smoke rose like a prayer into the winter sky. The bonfire burned through the afternoon, consuming wood they couldn't spare, but necessity outweighed caution. Margaret kept the shotgun across her knees, eyes fixed on the tree line where the men's smoke rose thin and gray against the white sky. Danny stayed inside, watching through the gap in the boarded window, the carved horse Tom had given him clutched in one hand. The sun was already sinking when she heard it. Not the men from the woods, but hoofbeats from the east, quick and purposeful. Thomas Sterling came over the ridge at a gallop, his horse throwing up sheets of snow. He reined in hard when he saw the bonfire, saw Margaret standing guard, and his weathered face went tight. How many? 3, maybe 4. In the trees since last night. He dismounted, pulled a rifle from his saddle. They approach yet? Once, I convinced them to wait. Tom's eyes flicked to the shotgun, then back to her face, reading the situation in the space between breaths. You alone? Danny's inside. How many shells you got left? 1. He nodded once, like this confirmed something he had already suspected. Then it's good I brought friends. 2 more riders crested the hill. The first was a woman younger than Margaret by a decade, with blonde hair tucked under a wool hat and a rifle slung across her back. The second was a boy, barely 19, lean and nervous looking. The woman dismounted with practiced ease. Sarah Reeves, Tom sent word through the station you might need help. Margaret's throat tightened. I didn't send word. Tom was already scanning the woods. Didn't need to. That bonfire's been visible from the creek road for hours. Half the territory knows something's wrong up here. The young man stayed on his horse, eyes darting between the trees and the house. Sarah caught Margaret's questioning look. That's Marcus. He's got good eyes and a steady hand. Figured you could use both. From the woods, a shout. Who's that with you, woman? You gathering an army? Tom raised his rifle toward the voice. Name's Thomas Sterling. I carry the territorial mail, which means I carry territorial law when I need to. You boys got names, or are we going to keep this anonymous? Silence. Then movement in the shadows. 4 figures emerged from the tree line, keeping their distance. The one in front was broad-shouldered, bearded, with the stance of a man used to taking what he wanted. Name's Garrett Kane. These are my boys. We don't want trouble, just hospitality. Tom spat into the snow. Hospitality you asked for at the door, not while hiding in the woods like wolves. Garrett's smile was all edges. Tried asking. Lady wasn't very welcoming. Lady's got a right to be cautious. You'd know that if you had a lick of decency. Decency don't keep a man warm. Garrett took a step forward. We've been hunting these woods for 2 weeks. Froze our provisions crossing the pass. Now we smell wood smoke and cooked meat, and you expect us to just keep walking? Sarah shifted, her hand moving to her rifle. Yes, that's exactly what we expect. Garrett's eyes settled on her, and something cold passed across his features. That's 2 women now. Interesting. That's 2 rifles and a territorial marshal, Tom corrected. Math's working against you. I count different. Garrett gestured, and 3 more men emerged from deeper in the trees. 7 total. Math's working just fine from where I'm standing. Marcus, still mounted, went pale. Margaret's finger found the trigger of the shotgun. 7 men against 4 defenders, and she had 1 shell. Tom had maybe 5 in his rifle. Sarah, unknown. Marcus looked like he might bolt. Tom's voice stayed level. You boys want to do this. We can do this. But you better understand something first. Mrs. Hartwell here, she's survived things that would break most men. She buried a child last fall, lost everything to keep the boy inside that house alive. You think she's going to hesitate pulling that trigger? You think any of us are? Garrett studied them, weighing odds. His men shifted behind him, less certain now. We'll make you a deal, Margaret heard herself say. You leave now. Tom here won't report you to the territorial marshal. You stay, you threaten my home, and whatever happens next is on you. That's real generous, Garrett's voice dripped mockery. But I got a better deal. You share your supplies, your fire, maybe some of that salted pork I can smell from here, and we all survive the night. Otherwise, well, 7's more than 4, and that math don't change no matter how tough you talk. Sarah chambered around. Actually, it does change, because you're assuming we're the only ones watching. Garrett frowned. What? Bonfire that size, visible from the creek road? Tom wasn't the only one who saw it. By my count, there's probably a dozen riders making their way up here right now, wondering what kind of trouble's brewing at the old Whitmore place. Sarah's voice carried absolute certainty, though Margaret had no idea if it was true. So you can wait around and explain to them why you were threatening a widow and her child, or you can disappear back into those trees and we all forget this happened. Garrett's jaw worked, anger and calculation fighting for control. Finally, he spat into the snow. This ain't over. Yes, it is. Tom raised his rifle an inch. Next time I see your face, I'll remember it. And I got friends from here to Helena who'll remember it too. You won't find hospitality anywhere in this territory. That's my promise. The men retreated into the trees, Garrett last, his eyes promising violence deferred but not forgotten. Margaret didn't lower the shotgun until they were gone. Tom turned to Sarah. There are actually riders coming? Not that I know of. But he didn't know that. Marcus finally dismounted, legs shaking. Sweet Jesus, I thought we were dead. Not today. Tom headed for the house. But we need to talk about what happens next, because those boys aren't going to stay gone forever. Inside, Danny emerged from his hiding spot under the stairs. Sarah knelt beside him, her voice gentle. You must be the brave young man holding down the fort. Danny nodded, still clutching the wooden horse. I loaded the shotgun. Mama showed me how. Sarah's eyes found Margaret's, a flash of understanding passing between them. I bet you're a crack shot too. Haven't tried yet. Well, maybe we'll fix that tomorrow. Sarah stood looking around the stripped interior. You burn all the furniture? Margaret's defenses rose. Fever broke 3 days ago. Had to keep him warm. I'm not judging. I've burned worse to survive. Sarah pulled off her hat, blonde hair spilling down. I lived through 2 winters in a dugout house with nothing but buffalo chips for fuel. You do what you have to. Tom was already checking the doors, the windows, evaluating defenses. This house is solid, but it's too big to defend with 4 people. We need to consolidate. Close off the upper floor, focus on keeping the main room secure. Marcus hovered near the door, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Margaret studied him, noting the way his eyes wouldn't meet anyone's directly, the tremor in his hands. You all right, son? I've never, he swallowed hard. I'm not good with confrontation. None of us are until we have to be. Margaret set the shotgun down. You got family in Dust Creek? No family anywhere. Tom found me half-starved on the creek road last month. Gave me work at the post station. Sarah was unpacking supplies from her saddlebag. He's good with numbers, terrible with people. Which is why Tom brought him instead of someone more useful in a fight. Marcus flushed. I can shoot. When you're not shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. That's enough. Tom's voice cut through the tension. Marcus came when I asked. That takes courage. Different kind than pulling a trigger, but courage all the same. They worked into the evening, fortifying the house. Tom nailed boards across the ground floor windows from the inside, leaving small gaps to shoot through. Sarah organized supplies, rationing what they had against what they might need. Marcus, given the task of inventory, found his hands steadied by the familiarity of counting and recording. Danny attached himself to Sarah, asking questions about her rifle, her horse, where she learned to shoot. She answered patiently, showing him how to clean a weapon, how to check ammunition, her hands quick and competent. Margaret pulled Tom aside while the others were occupied. Why'd you really bring them? Because Garrett Kane isn't what he seems. What do you mean? Tom glanced toward the door, voice dropping. I've seen wanted posters. Man matching his description killed 2 people in Wyoming last year. Burned their ranch, took everything they had. The floor seemed to tilt under Margaret's feet. And you didn't say anything out there? If I'd accused him, he would have had nothing to lose. Better to let him think we don't know. Let him believe running's still an option. But he's not running, he's waiting. That's why we're here, to make sure when he comes back, we're ready. Sarah joined them, having left Danny examining her saddlebags under Marcus's nervous supervision. The boy knows something's wrong, probably heard more than you think. He's 9. He shouldn't have to know any of this. No, he shouldn't, but he does. Sarah's expression held no pity, just recognition. My son was 8 when I had to teach him which plants were safe to eat and which would kill him. He was 9 when I showed him how to hide if men came to the house. Sometimes childhood ends early. That's not your failing. It's the world's. Margaret wanted to argue to defend the innocence she'd failed to preserve. But Sarah was already moving on, pulling Tom into a discussion about watch rotations, fields of fire, fallback positions. She talked like someone who'd defended ground before. When Margaret asked, Sarah's answer was simple. I was married to a man who liked to drink and didn't like to be questioned. Learned real quick that locks only work if you're strong enough to hold the door. Where is he now? Dead, fell off his horse drunk and broke his neck. Sarah said it without emotion. I didn't mourn. They ate cold rations, not wanting to draw attention with cooking smells. Danny fell asleep curled against Margaret's side, exhausted by fear and adrenaline. Tom took first watch. Marcus volunteered for second, though his hands still shook when he picked up the rifle. Sarah sat across from Margaret in the dim firelight. How long you planning to stay here? Don't have anywhere else to go. That's not what I asked. Margaret looked around the scarred walls, the broken floor where she'd torn up boards to burn. I thought this could be home. Stupid, probably. No more stupid than anything else. Home's just a place you're willing to defend. Sarah stretched, her back cracking. Question is whether you're willing to defend it against what's coming. You think they'll attack tonight? No, Garrett's smart. He'll wait, let us relax, let our guard drop. Then he'll come when we're tired and sloppy. How long? 2 days, maybe 3. Sarah's eyes reflected firelight like a predator's. Men like him, they need time to convince themselves the violence is justified, to build up anger. Right now he's embarrassed. In 2 days he'll be righteous. Margaret fed another piece of wood to the stove. You sound like you know a lot about men like that. I was married to one, remember? I learned to think like him. Only way to stay alive. And when he comes, Sarah's smile held no warmth. We kill him or he kills us. There's no third option with men like Garrett Kane. The night passed without incident. Tom woke Marcus for second watch, but the boy was so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. Sarah took over without comment, letting Marcus sleep. When Margaret woke near dawn, she found Sarah still alert, still watching, as if sleep was a luxury she'd long since abandoned. The next day brought brittle cold and clear skies. Tom rode down to check the creek road, came back with news that made Margaret's stomach clench. Found their camp. They've got supplies for weeks. They're not just passing through, they're settling in. How many did you count? 7, like Garrett said. But there's signs of more, extra bedrolls, more gear than 7 men would need. Sarah checked her rifle. They're waiting for reinforcements. Or planning something that needs more men than confronting 4 people in a house. Margaret thought of Danny, asleep upstairs. What could they possibly want that badly? Maybe nothing. Maybe they just don't like being told no. Tom's expression darkened. Or maybe Garrett recognized this place, the Whitmore house. Stories say Jacob had money hidden here. Probably nonsense, but desperate men believe in treasure. There's no treasure, just letters and memories. Doesn't matter what's true, matters what they believe. That afternoon, while Tom and Sarah discussed defensive strategies, Marcus approached Margaret with something in his hands. Jacob Whitmore's letters. Her voice came out sharper than intended. Where did you get those? The chest was open. I didn't mean to pry. I saw the handwriting and... He looked miserable. I used to write letters like this. Before. Before what? Marcus sat down heavily, still holding the letters like they might burn him. Before I had to choose between my father and everything decent. The story came out slowly, painfully. Marcus's father was Garrett Kane's brother, dead now 3 years. Marcus had grown up in that world, violence and theft normalized, compassion beaten out of him early. When his father died, his uncle Garrett took over, expecting Marcus to fall in line. But I couldn't. I tried, God knows I tried. But every time we'd rob someone, hurt someone, I'd see my mother's face. She died trying to protect me from my father's fists. His hands shook on the letters. When Garrett planned the Wyoming job, the one where those people died, I ran. Took a horse and just ran. Margaret's mind raced, recalculating everything. Does Garrett know you're here? I don't think so. I've been growing my beard out, staying out of sight. But if he looks close, Marcus met her eyes, terrified. He'll kill me. Not might. Will. Why tell me this? Because when he comes, and he will come, you need to know you can't trust me not to break. I want to be brave. I want to stand with you. But I'm my father's son, and fear's in my blood. Before Margaret could respond, Tom burst through the door. They're moving. All of them. Coming up the hill. Sarah grabbed her rifle. How many? All 7, armed. They're not trying to hide it this time. Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs. Danny was already scrambling down the stairs, reading the panic in the adults' faces. She pulled him close. Remember what we talked about? Where to hide? The root cellar. Go there now. Don't come out until I say it's safe. But Mama... Now, Danny. He ran. Margaret picked up the shotgun, that single shell suddenly feeling both impossibly heavy and laughably insufficient. Tom positioned himself at the front window. Sarah took the side. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the room. Marcus, Tom's voice cut through his paralysis. You can leave out the back. No one would blame you. The boy's face worked through a dozen emotions. Then he picked up the extra rifle Tom had brought, checked the chamber with trembling hands. No, I'm done running. Garrett's voice carried across the snow. Mrs. Hartwell, we're coming in. You can open the door peaceful or we can break it down. Either way, this ends today. Margaret moved to the gap in the boards, made sure her voice would carry. This house is defended. You come any closer, people die. People are gonna die anyway. Question is how many. Garrett was closer now, maybe 30 yards. See, we had time to think, time to remember things, like how old Jacob Whitmore, the man who built this place, he had Confederate gold. Whole chest of it, payment for smuggling arms during the war. Money like that doesn't just disappear. There's no gold here. Maybe, maybe not, but we're gonna look. And if we find you've been lying, well, things will go harder than they need to. Sarah's whisper was urgent. He's trying to provoke a fight, make us shoot first so he can claim self-defense later. There won't be any later if he gets inside. Tom raised his rifle. On my mark, we fire a volley over their heads. Show them we're serious. Maybe they'll back off. But before anyone could move, Marcus stumbled forward, his face gone white. Uncle Garrett, it's me, it's Marcus. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Garrett's laugh, ugly and delighted. Well, I'll be damned. My prodigal nephew. Come on out here, boy. We got catching up to do. Marcus looked back at Margaret, at Tom, at Sarah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Then he walked to the door. Marcus, don't. But he was already sliding the bar back, stepping outside. Through the gap in the boards, Margaret watched Garrett approach his nephew. The big man's hand came down on Marcus's shoulder, seemingly friendly. Then he spun the boy around and punched him in the stomach. Marcus doubled over, gasping. You ran out on family, boy. You know what that means. Marcus could barely speak. I couldn't do it anymore. The killing, another punch, this one to the face. Marcus went down. Garrett stood over him. Get up. Uncle, please. I said get up. Marcus tried to rise. Garrett kicked him in the ribs. The crack was audible even inside the house. Sarah's knuckles were white on her rifle. We have to do something. We shoot now. We start a war we can't win. Tom's voice was agonized. 7 guns against 3. Marcus made his choice. But it didn't look like a choice anymore. It looked like execution. Margaret's hands moved before her mind caught up. She threw open the door, shotgun raised. That's enough, Garrett. The big man looked up, still standing over his nephew's broken form. This is family business. This is murder. Do it somewhere else. Or what? You'll shoot me with that antique? Garrett took a step toward her. You got 1 shell in there, maybe 2. You're gonna waste it on me when I got 6 men backing me up? Maybe I will. Maybe you're worth it. Garrett's expression shifted, reading something in her face. You would too. You're crazy enough. Crazy's just another word for having nothing left to lose. They stood there 10 feet apart, the shotgun barrel never wavering. Behind Garrett, his men shuffled, uncertain. Behind Margaret, Tom and Sarah flanked the door, rifles ready. Marcus coughed blood into the snow. Aunt Margaret, don't. He'll kill you. Aunt Margaret? Garrett's eyes narrowed. That's touching. Boy found himself a new family already. How sweet. He kicked Marcus again. Tell me, nephew, you sleep warm last night? Belly full? While I was freezing in the woods? We offered you a chance to leave peacefully. And I'm offering you a chance now. Hand over Marcus, give us your supplies, and we walk away. You get to keep your life and your boy. No deal. Then I guess we got ourselves a situation. Garrett signaled his men forward. They spread out, circling the house. You can shoot me, sure, but then my boys light this place up. You got 2 rifles and a shotgun. We got 7 guns and all the time in the world. Sarah's voice came from behind Margaret. Actually, you've got about 3 minutes. That's supposed to scare me? Riders coming from the creek road. 8, maybe 9. Tom's friends from Dust Creek. Guess that bonfire worked better than we thought. Garrett spun. In the distance, shapes were moving through the snow. Could have been riders, could have been shadows. But doubt crept into his posture. You're bluffing. Maybe. You want to bet your life on it? Garrett's men were already backing toward the trees. The big man grabbed Marcus by the collar, hauling him up as a shield. Then I guess we're taking some insurance. Come looking for the boy. We'll send him back in pieces. He dragged Marcus into the woods. His men melted after them. Within seconds, they were gone, leaving nothing but blood in the snow and the sound of Marcus's choked sobbing fading into the trees. Margaret lowered the shotgun, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Tom was already moving, checking sight lines, making sure they were really gone. Sarah touched Margaret's shoulder. You did the right thing, opening that door. He's got Marcus now. Marcus was dead the second Garrett recognized him. At least this way we bought time. Time for what? For those riders to actually show up. Sarah pointed down the creek road where the shadows were resolving into actual horsemen of fun. Because that part wasn't a bluff. 9 riders crested the hill, led by a man in a marshal's badge. Tom stepped out to meet them, explaining quickly. The marshal, a hard-eyed man named Coleman, listened without expression. Garrett Kane, heard that name before, wanted in 3 territories. Coleman looked at the blood trail leading into the woods. He got your boy. My nephew, Tom corrected. Well, his nephew. Marcus ran away from him months ago. Running don't mean much to men like Kane. He'll use the boy as bait, try to draw you out. Margaret's voice was steady despite the tremor in her limbs. So what do we do? Coleman studied her, taking measure. You the one held them off with a single-shot scattergun? Didn't have a choice. Always got a choice. Question is whether you got the spine to make it. He gestured to his men. We'll track them, see if we can negotiate a release. But if shooting starts, I need to know you folks won't fold. We won't fold, Susha. Good, because Kane's the type who will burn this whole valley if he thinks it'll save his hide. Coleman turned his horse. You got more ammunition than 1 shell? Tom held up the box he'd brought. Enough. Then load up and stay sharp. This isn't over. The marshal and his men disappeared into the trees after Garrett. The afternoon stretched into evening, then night. No word came back. Danny emerged from the root cellar, frightened and hungry. Margaret fed him, held him, tried to explain why Marcus was gone. Is he going to die, Mama? I don't know, baby. It's not fair. He was nice to me. Nothing about this was fair, but Margaret had stopped expecting fairness around the same time she'd buried Emma. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be hard enough without being tired. But sleep was impossible. Sarah took watch while Tom dozed fitfully by the door. Margaret sat with the shotgun, now loaded with one of Tom's shells, and waited for something to happen. Around midnight, it did. A figure stumbled out of the tree line, lurching toward the house. Tom raised his rifle, then lowered it. It's Marcus. They brought him inside. He was barely conscious, face swollen, ribs clearly broken, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle. Blood soaked through his shirt from a dozen cuts. Sarah started cleaning wounds while Margaret held a cup of water to his split lips. What happened? Let me go. Marcus's voice was thick with pain and shame. Told him he didn't need me. Just let me go. Why would Garrett do that? Wanted me to tell you. They're coming back. Tomorrow night. All of them. Marcus coughed, spattering blood. And they're bringing more men. 10, maybe 12, got friends camped 2 valleys over. Tom swore. 12 men against 4. We can't hold them. Have to. Marcus gripped Margaret's hand with his good one. Have to. Because if you run, they'll just find someone else. Someone weaker. They always do. Sarah finished bandaging as best she could. He needs a doctor. Those ribs could puncture a lung. Can't get to Dust Creek before they come back. Tom paced, thinking, we'd never make it. They'd catch us on the road. Then we fight. Margaret said it quietly, but everyone heard. We'll die. Maybe, or maybe we win. She looked at each of them in turn. Sarah with her scarred hands and survivor's eyes. Tom with his graying beard and steady courage. Marcus broken on the floor but still breathing, still choosing. Jacob Whitmore built this house with love. His wife Clara died trying to save a child. They made this place mean something. I'll be damned if I let men like Garrett Kane turn it into a tomb. Sarah checked her rifle. You know we're probably going to die, right? Probably, but at least we'll die for something worth the cost. Tom stopped pacing. Then we better get ready, because tomorrow night hell's coming to Dust Creek Hill, and we're all that's standing in its way. They worked through the night. Tom rigged tripwires in the snow, attached bells that would warn of approach. Sarah positioned ammunition at every window, mapped firing lanes, established fallback positions. Margaret showed Danny the root cellar again, made him promise to hide no matter what he heard. Marcus, despite his injuries, helped where he could. He knew how Garrett thought, how he fought. He'll send men to the back while he comes through the front, split our attention, and he'll use fire, always uses fire when he can't break through with bullets. Then we make sure he can't get close enough to throw torches. He'll sacrifice men to do it. He doesn't care who dies as long as he wins. Sarah's voice was grim. Then we make him care. Make every inch of ground cost him blood. Dawn came cold and clear. Marshal Coleman returned alone, his face tight with anger. Lost the trail at the river. They split up, circled back. Could be anywhere by now. We know where they are. Margaret told him about Marcus, about the warning. Coleman studied the wounded boy. You're Kane's nephew? Was, not anymore. And you're warning the people he's going to attack. I'm trying to be better than my blood says I should be. The marshal was quiet for a moment. How many men you got? 4, including him. Tom gestured at Marcus. Plus you, if you're sewing. I got 8 deputies. Against 12 of Kane's crew, that's close to even. Coleman dismounted. Problem is I can't prove Kane's planning an attack. Can't arrest him on your say-so, even with the boy's testimony. So what can you do? I can be here. Me and my men. If Kane attacks, we defend. That's legal. That's righteous. Coleman started issuing orders to his deputies, setting up positions around the house. But you folks need to understand something. When the shooting starts, it's gonna get ugly. People will die. Maybe all of us. You want to run instead? I won't judge. Margaret thought of Emma's grave, somewhere far behind them in ground she'd never see again. Thought of Danny upstairs, depending on her to keep him alive. Thought of this house that had sheltered them when they had nothing, warmed them when they should have frozen, held them when the world wanted them dead. No, we stay, we fight. And if we die, at least we die standing. Coleman's weathered face creased into something almost like a smile. Then I guess we better make sure we don't die. The day passed in tense preparation. Danny, sensing the gravity, stayed quiet and out of the way. Sarah taught him how to reload rifles, how to pass ammunition without getting in the line of fire. Tom showed him the root cellar one more time, made him practice getting there in the dark. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, fever burning through him from infection. Margaret bathed his forehead with snow water, whispered reassurances she didn't believe. I'm sorry, he mumbled during a lucid moment. I brought this on you. You warned us. That took courage. No, courage is what you are doing, staying, fighting. His eyes focused on her face. I should have stood up to him years ago, should have protected the people he hurt instead of running. You were a boy. You did what you could. I'm not a boy anymore. As evening approached, Coleman positioned his men in a perimeter around the house. He kept two inside with Margaret, Tom, and Sarah. The rest spread out, hidden in the snow, waiting. The sun set in a blaze of red and gold. Danny hugged Margaret tight before climbing down into the root cellar. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. No matter what happens, remember that. Then it was just waiting. Margaret stood at the window, shotgun loaded, watching the tree line. Beside her, Sarah breathed steady and slow. Tom checked his rifle for the 100th time. Marcus lay near the stove, too weak to fight but refusing to hide. When the wolves had come, Margaret had been alone. When the fever struck, she'd been helpless. When Garrett first threatened, she'd been afraid. But now, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with her, she felt something new. Not confidence, exactly, not certainty, but a kind of fierce resolve that burned hotter than fear. The first torch appeared just after full dark, then another, then a dozen more, ringing the house in firelight. Garrett's voice boomed across the snow. Last chance, Mrs. Hartwell. Open the door. Give us what we want, or burn. Margaret's answer was a shotgun blast that sent the nearest torchbearer diving for cover. The shot went wide, intentionally, but the message was clear. Coleman stepped into view, Marshall's badge gleaming. Garrett Kane, you're under arrest for attempted murder, robbery, and assault. Surrender now and you'll face trial. Resist and you'll face consequences. Garrett's laugh was wild. Consequences? You're 9 men against 12, and we're already committed. There's no backing down now. Then I guess we're doing this the hard way. Garrett raised his hand. Light them up. The torches flew. Margaret watched them arc through the darkness like falling stars, trailing smoke and malice. Most landed in snow and guttered out. But one hit the barn roof. Another landed against the side of the house where the wood was dry. Fire bloomed in the night, hungry and bright. The fire caught faster than Margaret expected, climbing the dry wood with eager fingers. Tom was already moving, grabbing buckets they'd filled with snow water. Sarah threw one against the spreading flames while Coleman's deputies scrambled to contain the blaze before it consumed the entire structure. Gunfire erupted from the tree line. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. Margaret dropped below the window as bullets punched through gaps in the boards. One of Coleman's men cried out, clutching his shoulder. Another returned fire, his rifle barking 3 times in quick succession. They're trying to pin us down while the house burns. Tom threw another bucket at the flames licking up the wall. We need to get everyone out the back before we're trapped. But Margaret saw Garrett's strategy unfolding. 3 men were circling toward the rear, torches ready. If they abandoned the front, those men would torch the back exit. If they stayed to fight the fire, the smoke and heat would drive them out anyway. We split. Her voice cut through the chaos. Tom, you and 2 deputies hold the back. Sarah and I keep them busy at the front. Make them think we're all still here. Coleman was already dragging his wounded man toward cover. That's suicide. They've got numbers. They've got fire. We've got stubbornness. Margaret checked the shotgun. 2 shells loaded now. And spite. Don't underestimate spite. Sarah positioned herself at the far window, rifle steady despite the heat building in the room. When this is over, remind me never to play cards with you. You bluff better than a riverboat gambler. Another volley of shots. Glass shattered. The stove's heat combined with the spreading fire turned the room into an oven. Marcus, still conscious despite his injuries, pulled himself toward a bucket of water. His broken ribs made every movement agony, but he managed to splash water on the nearest flames. You should be in the cellar with Danny. Margaret's hands worked mechanically, reloading. Should be dead in a ditch somewhere. Seems like I'm not good at doing what I should. He coughed blood, but kept moving. Besides, I know where Garrett will attack next. He always goes for the weakest point. Which is? Whoever shows mercy first. He'll force a situation where you have to choose between saving someone or defending yourself. Then he'll exploit that choice. Before Margaret could ask what he meant, a scream pierced the gunfire. One of Coleman's deputies burst from the trees, clothes aflame, running blindly. He collapsed in the snow 20 feet from the house, rolling to smother the fire. Garrett's voice carried over the crackling flames. That's one. How many more are you willing to watch burn, Marshall? You can end this. Just walk away. Coleman's face was stone. Every man here knew the risks. But the burning deputy was trying to crawl toward them, leaving a trail of scorched fabric and skin in the snow. Margaret recognized the trap Marcus had warned about. If they went out to help him, they'd be exposed. If they didn't, they'd watch a man die. Sarah beat her to the door. "Cover me." She was through before anyone could stop her, moving low and fast. Gunfire erupted, but she'd chosen her moment well, using the smoke as cover. She reached the deputy, grabbed him under the arms, started dragging him back. A figure rose from behind a snowbank, rifle aimed at Sarah's exposed back. Margaret's shotgun roared. The figure dropped. Sarah made it to the porch, heaving the burned man inside before more shots drove her to cover. "Fool woman!" But Coleman was already examining the deputy's burns, ripping cloth for bandages. "Could have gotten yourself killed. Could have let him die." Sarah reloaded without shaking. "This is the part where you tell me which would have been smarter." The marshal's silence was answer enough. The battle settled into a rhythm of fire and counterfire. Garrett's men stayed back, content to let the flames do their work. The house blazed on the south wall now, the heat forcing everyone toward the north side. Tom's voice called from the back that 3 men were advancing with torches. Margaret made a decision that went against every survival instinct. "Marcus, you can still walk?" "Barely." "Then go to the root cellar. Get Danny. Bring him up." Tom spun from his position. "Have you lost your mind?" "Maybe. But Garrett wants this house. Wants whatever imaginary treasure he thinks is here. Danny's the only leverage we have." "You're using your son as bait?" "I'm using everything we have, because half measures get us all killed." She met Tom's horrified stare. "You got a better idea, I'm listening. But make it fast because we're burning." Marcus pulled himself upright, using the wall. "I'll get him, but Mrs. Hartwell, if this goes wrong, then I'll die knowing I tried everything." The minutes stretched while Marcus descended into the cellar. Margaret kept firing, keeping Garrett's men honest. Sarah worked the other window, her shots precise and economical. The roof groaned as fire weakened its timbers. Danny emerged pale but composed, Marcus's hand on his shoulder. The boy's eyes took in the burning walls, the wounded men, the chaos that had been their refuge. "Mama, I need you to be brave one more time, baby. Can you do that?" He nodded, though his whole body trembled. Margaret walked him to the shattered front window, made sure he was visible in the firelight. Then she shouted into the darkness, "Garrett Kane, you want to negotiate? Here's your chance. I've got something you want. You've got something I need. Let's talk terms." The shooting stopped. In the sudden quiet, the fire's roar seemed deafening. Garrett stepped into view, silhouetted against his men's torches. "You bringing that boy out means you're desperate. It means I'm practical. You want this house. I want safe passage for everyone inside. Simple trade. What makes you think I want the house more than I want you dead? Because dead people don't tell you where treasure's hidden, and I know where Jacob Whitmore kept his gold." That stopped him. Margaret could see the calculation in his posture, greed warring with vengeance. Behind her, Tom whispered urgently that she was insane. She ignored him. "You're lying." But Garrett's voice held doubt. "Maybe. Or maybe I found it while digging through this place. Maybe that's why I fought so hard to keep you out. Maybe I've been sitting on a fortune while you froze in those woods." She pulled Danny closer, hating herself for it. "Only one way to find out. But if you burn this house down, you'll never know for certain." Marcus leaned close, voice barely audible. "There is no gold. You're betting everything on a lie. I'm betting everything on his greed being bigger than his pride. Now be quiet and look threatening." Garrett conferred with his men. The fire continued spreading, eating through the south wall. Smoke filled the room, making breathing painful. Coleman's burned deputy had passed out from pain. Another of the marshal's men reported they were nearly out of ammunition for the rifles. Finally, Garrett called back. "All right, you and the boy come out. Everyone else stays. We search the house, find the gold. Everyone walks away." "No, everyone comes out first. Then you search. You find what you're looking for, you let us go. You don't find it, well, maybe I was lying, but by then we'll be too far away for you to catch. What stops me from just killing you all once you're outside?" "Marshal Coleman. He's got deputies positioned in those woods. You start executing unarmed people. They light you up. You let us go, they let you go. Everybody lives to steal another day. It was a complete fabrication. Coleman had most of his men inside or wounded, but in darkness and chaos, Garrett couldn't know that. Margaret watched him calculate, weighing odds. How do I know the marshals really got men out there? Coleman stepped into view beside Margaret. You don't, but you willing to bet your life I'm bluffing? After everything tonight? The standoff stretched. Somewhere in the house, a beam cracked and fell. Danny pressed against Margaret's side. She could feel his heart racing, or maybe that was her own pulse pounding in her ears. Then from the trees, a new voice. Garrett, riders coming up the creek road, lots of them. Garrett spun. In the distance, torches bobbed through the darkness. At least 20, maybe more. Margaret had no idea who they were, but she used the distraction. That'll be reinforcements from Dust Creek. Seems our bonfire brought more than just Tom Sterling. She raised her voice. You've got maybe 10 minutes before this becomes a real fight. Or you can take the deal. Your choice. Garrett's men were already shifting, nervous. The approaching riders meant the odds had turned catastrophically against them. But Garrett himself stood rigid, fury radiating off him like heat. You think you're clever. You think you've won. But I'm going to make you a promise, Mrs. Hartwell. I will burn everything you love. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But I'll find you, and when I do, I'll make you watch your boy die before I kill you slow. Marcus stepped forward, then moving past Margaret despite his injuries. No, Uncle, you won't. Boy, get out of my way. I'm done moving for you, done being afraid of you. Marcus's voice strengthened despite the pain clearly racking him. You want to hurt these people? You go through me first. Garrett's laugh was ugly. You can barely stand. You think you can stop me? I think I can try, which is more than I've done my whole life. Marcus pulled a knife from his belt, the blade catching firelight. And I think you're not half as scary as you want people to believe. You're just a bully who never grew past throwing his weight around. The riders were getting closer. Garrett's men started backing toward the trees. But Garrett himself seemed frozen, staring at his nephew like he was seeing him for the first time. I raised you, fed you, kept you alive when your daddy died. You beat me, terrorized me, made me watch while you hurt people. Marcus took a painful step forward. But I'm not that scared kid anymore. You want to kill me? Kill me, but you're not touching them. For a moment, Margaret thought Garrett would shoot. His hand moved to his gun, fingers flexing. Then he spat in the snow and turned away. This ain't over. Yes, it is. Coleman raised his rifle. You and your men disappear tonight. I'll report you headed east. Give you a 12-hour head start. But if I ever see your face in this territory again, I'll hang you myself. The riders crested the hill. Garrett saw them clearly now, saw that he was outnumbered 3-1. With a curse, he whistled to his men. They melted into the forest like smoke. The approaching riders resolved into townspeople from Dust Creek, armed with hunting rifles and shotguns. Tom Sterling had sent word through the postal network, and they'd come. Not trained fighters, just farmers and shopkeepers and craftsmen who decided that some things were worth defending. The leader, a broad-shouldered blacksmith Margaret vaguely recognized, surveyed the burning house. Looks like we're late to the painter. You're right on time. Coleman lowered his rifle. Help us get this fire out before the whole place collapses. They formed bucket lines from the well, working through the night. The fire was stubborn, but human persistence wore it down. By dawn, the house still stood, though the south wall was charred and the roof had partially collapsed. The barn was a total loss, just smoking timbers. Danny emerged from the cellar when Margaret called him, throwing himself into her arms. She held him while the adrenaline finally drained away, leaving her shaking and exhausted. Around them, men and women she barely knew worked to save a house that meant nothing to them personally, but everything as a symbol. Sarah found her sitting on the porch steps as the sun rose. You lied about the gold. I did. Risky. Everything's risky. That was just slightly more so than usual. Sarah sat beside her, both women watching the cleanup efforts. Where do you think Garrett went in? Far if he's smart, but men like that, they're rarely smart for long. Marcus was being tended by one of the women from town, his injuries properly dressed now. He caught Margaret's eye and nodded once, a small acknowledgement of something changed between them. He'd stood against his blood. That had to count for something. By midday, the house was secured enough to be safe. The townspeople prepared to leave, some offering to return with materials for rebuilding. Tom Sterling stayed, helping board up the damaged sections against weather. Margaret walked through the scarred interior. The stove still stood, miraculously untouched. Jacob's letters had survived in their box, but the west wall would need complete replacement, the roof would have to be rebuilt, and the furniture she'd burned to save Danny's life was, of course, still gone. "You planning to stay?" Coleman asked. He delayed his departure, wanting to be sure no stragglers from Garrett's gang remained. "Don't have anywhere else to be. Most people would run after a night like that. Most people didn't spend everything they had just to survive the winter. I'm already invested." She managed a tired smile. "Besides, I told Jacob Whitmore's ghost I'd make this place warm again. Seems wrong to quit now." A wagon appeared on the road that afternoon, driven by an elderly woman bundled against the cold. She stopped at the gate, studying the damaged house with eyes that held memory and recognition. Sarah helped her down. "Can we help you, ma'am?" "I hope so. I'm Grace Whitmore. Heard there was trouble at my grandfather's house." Margaret's exhaustion evaporated. "Your grandfather?" "Jacob Whitmore. Built this place in 1836. Grace walked toward the house slowly, leaning on a cane. "I was born here in 1782. Left when I was 12 after my father died. Been living in Helena since. But when word came that someone was living here again, defending it, I had to see for myself." They brought her inside, gave her coffee and a chair near the stove. Grace's hands shook slightly as she touched the familiar walls. "Looks worse than I remember, but it's still standing. That's something." "What happened here, Mrs. Whitmore? Tom told us about Jacob dying in the cold, but—" Margaret hesitated. "The letter suggests something different." Grace's eyes grew distant. "People love a tragic story. Makes them feel better about their own lives. But the truth about Jacob and Clara is simpler than the legend." She told them. Jacob hadn't been a cruel jailer. Clara hadn't been a prisoner. They'd loved each other deeply, but Clara had struggled with the isolation. Not the land itself, she'd found beauty in it, but the loneliness that came with frontier living. The winter she died, she was visiting me and my mother in town, helping with a difficult birth. On the way home, she saw a child wandering in a blizzard, separated from his parents. She could have passed by, should have kept riding. But Clara never could ignore someone in need. The child had survived. Clara hadn't. She'd used her own body to shelter him, giving him her coat, her warmth, everything she had. By the time help arrived, she was too far gone. Jacob spent 15 years after that writing letters, not to Clara's ghost, but to whoever would find this place next, begging them to remember that love built these walls, that sacrifice sanctified this ground, asking them to make it a home again, not a monument to grief. Grace pulled a folded paper from her coat. "He wrote one last letter before he died. Asked me to deliver it if anyone ever came back to this house, if anyone cared enough to defend it." She handed it to Margaret. The paper was old, brittle, but the handwriting was clear. "To whoever fought for this house, you've already proven yourself worthy of it. The treasure everyone whispers about isn't gold. It's the chance to build something that lasts, to create warmth in a cold world, to stand firm when everything says run. The house is yours now, not by deed but by right of blood and determination. Use it well, make it mean something. And when you're gone, may someone else fight for it as you have." It was signed Jacob Whitmore, dated February 1851. Margaret read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. Grace watched her with kind eyes. "I never claimed the property after Jacob died. Didn't seem right. But I've carried the deed with me for 30 years, waiting for the right person." She pulled out another paper. "It's yours, Mrs. Hartwell. No cost, no conditions. Just a request that you honor what Jacob and Clara built here. I don't understand. You could sell this place, make money. Money's just paper. Legacy is what you leave behind." Grace stood, steadier now. "I'm 72 years old, got no children, no one to pass this to. But you fought for it. You bled for it. That makes it yours more than any signature on a deed. Sarah was crying quietly. Tom cleared his throat roughly. Even Coleman looked moved. Grace pressed the deed into Margaret's hands. There's one more thing. Jacob left a small fund at the bank in Helena. Not much, about $200. He wanted it used to rebuild if the house ever burned. I've been managing it, letting it grow. There's close to 800 now. Should be enough to fix the damage and then some. Margaret couldn't speak. Grace patted her hand. You gave Jacob's house new life. That's worth more than money could buy. The old woman left that evening, but her visit changed everything. With the deed legally transferred and funds available for repair, the impossible became merely difficult. Over the following weeks, volunteers from Dust Creek arrived to help rebuild. Marcus, recuperating slowly, proved to have a gift for carpentry. The violence in his blood translated to precision with wood and nail. He worked alongside the blacksmith, the shopkeepers, the farmers, building not just walls but a kind of redemption. Sarah stayed. She never explained why, just quietly integrated herself into the household. She taught Danny to read better, to shoot straight, to think before acting. In return, she found something she'd lost with her husband's death: purpose beyond mere survival. Tom Sterling's visits became daily, then permanent. He moved his base of operations to the house, running mail routes from there. He and Margaret never spoke of marriage, but they fell into the rhythms of partnership, two people battered by life finding comfort in shared labor. The house rose from its ashes. New walls replaced charred ones. The roof went up beam by beam. Windows were installed, real glass instead of oiled paper. They built it smaller than before, more efficient, easier to heat. One story instead of two, but with a large common room centered around the rebuilt stove. Tom carved words into the main beam where everyone could see them. The Warm House, built 1836, reborn, Trenton, forever open. By spring, when the snow finally melted for good, people were calling their little settlement Hartwell Commons. 3 more families built homes within a mile, drawn by the story of the woman who'd held off Garrett Kane. A small school opened in a converted barn. Someone started a general store, and the house itself became a way station for travelers. Margaret never turned anyone away. If you needed food, she fed you. If you needed shelter, she housed you. If you needed hope, well, sometimes just seeing that the Warm House still stood was enough. Marcus proved the most surprising transformation. Once his ribs healed, he threw himself into helping others build. He'd spent his life tearing things down. Now he discovered joy in creation. When a traveling minister came through, Marcus asked about redemption, about whether a man could outrun his past. Can't outrun it, but you can outlive it. Be better tomorrow than you were today. String enough tomorrows together and eventually you're a different man. Marcus took that to heart. When word came months later that Garrett Kane had been caught in Wyoming territory and hanged for murder, Marcus didn't celebrate. He just nodded once and kept working on the chair he was building. Margaret married Tom in the fall, a simple ceremony with the whole settlement attending. Danny, now 10 and stronger than he'd been in years, stood as witness. Sarah baked a cake. Marcus built them a bed frame from cherry wood he'd traded for at the general store. That winter passed gentler than the last. The house held heat efficiently. Food was plentiful. When storms came, neighbors helped each other. The loneliness that had nearly killed them all just a year before seemed like a distant memory. One evening in December, a knock came at the door. Margaret opened it to find Garrett Kane standing there, though it took her a moment to recognize him. He'd lost weight, aged 10 years and 1. His hands were bound, 2 territorial marshals flanking him. "Ma'am, we caught him trying to cross into Canada. He asked to stop here on the way to trial in Helena, said he had something to say." Margaret's hand moved toward the rifle by the door, but Tom's touch on her shoulder stopped her. "Let's hear it." Garrett stood in the snow, broken in ways that had nothing to do with chains. "I came to say I was wrong. About everything, about you, about this place, about thinking I could take what I wanted just because I was strong enough." "That's supposed to make me forgive you?" "No, nothing makes that right. I just wanted you to know that watching you fight, watching you stand when I tried to break you, it showed me something, showed me that strength isn't about who can hurt people most. It's about who can keep building when everything says quit." He looked at Marcus, who'd come to stand beside Margaret. "You were right, boy. I was just a bully, and bullies are cowards who never learn better. The marshals prepared to take him away. Margaret spoke before they could. Wait, they stopped. Garrett met her eyes, expecting nothing, hoping for even less. You hurt people, threatened my son, tried to burn my home. I should want you hanged. I know. But Clara Whitmore died saving a child who wasn't hers. Jacob spent years writing letters to people he'd never meet, just hoping someone would carry on the love they built here. Margaret took a breath. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write to the judge. Tell him what you did, but also tell him you came here to apologize. Tell him that people can change if they're given reason to. I can't promise it'll help, but maybe it'll be enough to spare your life. Garrett's face crumpled. Why would you do that? Because this house taught me that holding on to hate just makes the cold worse. And because I've got to believe that even men like you can be better than their worst moment. The marshals took him away. Tom shook his head wonderingly. You know, he probably doesn't deserve that mercy. Probably not, but mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to build instead of destroy. Years folded over each other like snowdrifts. Danny grew into a young man, steady and thoughtful. He apprenticed with Doc from Dust Creek, learning medicine. By the time he was 14, he could set bones and suture wounds with hands that remembered their own hunger and shaking. Sarah married the blacksmith in 1855, a quiet man who'd lost his first wife to fever. They had 2 children, both daughters who learned to shoot before they learned to sew. Sarah never spoke of her first marriage, but sometimes Margaret would catch her watching her new husband with an expression of wonder, as though she couldn't quite believe gentleness was real. Marcus never married. He built a small cabin near the creek and took to craftsmanship with single-minded devotion. People came from 3 counties over for his furniture, which was famous for being both beautiful and unbreakable. He donated half his profits to the school, funding books and supplies. Tom and Margaret had a daughter, Emma, named for the child Margaret had lost. The girl had her mother's eyes and her father's steady temperament. She grew up in a house filled with strangers turned friends, learning early that family was more than blood. The warm house itself became legendary. Travelers knew they'd find food and shelter there, no questions asked. Families used it as a gathering place for weddings, funerals, celebrations. The school held classes there when their building flooded one spring. In 1856, Margaret received a letter from Helena. Garrett Kane had been sentenced to 10 years hard labor instead of hanging. The judge cited her testimony, her request for mercy. The letter included a note from Garrett himself written in careful script. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm using my time to learn carpentry from a fellow prisoner. When I'm released, if you'll have me, I'd like to help Marcus build. Not for pay, just to prove I can make something instead of destroying it. You don't owe me an answer. Just wanted you to know that your mercy didn't go to waste. She didn't answer immediately. But 5 years later, when a thin, weathered man appeared at Hartwell Commons asking for Marcus, she recognized Garrett despite the changes. He'd served his time. He looked like he'd earned every day of it. Marcus met him on the porch. They stood there, uncle and nephew, separated by years of pain and a fragile hope for something better. I'm not asking for family. Garrett's voice was rough from disuse. Just a chance to work, to prove I can be more than what I was. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded toward his workshop. I need help building cabinets for the new church. Pays fair, works hard. You can sleep in the barn till you've earned trust. That's more than I deserve. Yeah, it is. Don't waste it. Garrett didn't. He worked quietly, keeping to himself, letting his hands speak instead of his mouth. Over time, the settlement accepted him warily, then grudgingly, then eventually as just another person trying to make their way. By 1858, Hartwell Commons had grown to 12 families, 63 people. They built a proper church, a school, a town hall. The warm house remained at its center, both literally and symbolically. Margaret, now 39, stood on the porch one winter evening, watching snow fall soft as prayer. Tom came out to join her, their daughter Emma asleep inside, Danny home from medical school in St. Louis for the winter. 5 years ago, we were burning furniture to survive. 5 years ago, I thought we'd die in that storm. Tom's arm went around her shoulders. Look at it now. The settlement glowed with lamplight, smoke rising from a dozen chimneys. Laughter drifted from the town hall where someone was hosting a dance. The church bell rang, calling people to evening services. Jacob and Clara would be proud, I think. They're why we're here. They built the foundation. We just had to remember how to stand on it. A wagon appeared on the road, moving slowly through the snow. Margaret recognized the telltale lurch of a broken wheel, the exhausted slump of people who traveled too far on too little hope. Tom saw it too. Looks like we've got visitors. We always do. They walked down to meet the wagon. A woman climbed down, thin and frightened, two children huddled in the back. I'm sorry to bother you folks. Our wheel broke about a mile back. We've been walking since noon. No bother, Margaret helped one of the children down. Come inside, there's food and fire. You can fix your wheel tomorrow. The woman's eyes filled with tears. We can't pay. Didn't ask you to, just get those babies warm. As they walked toward the house, the woman noticed the carved beam above the door. The Warm House. That's a nice name. It is, isn't it? Took us a while to earn it, but it fits. Inside, the stove radiated heat. Danny was teaching Emma a card game while Sarah's daughters argued over a book. Marcus sat in the corner, sketching plans for a new barn. Garrett worked on repairing a chair leg, his movements careful and precise. They made room for the newcomers without hesitation. Food appeared, blankets. Someone started coffee. The children, initially shy, warmed quickly to the chaos and kindness. The woman sat near the fire, cradling a cup in her hands. Why are you all being so nice? You don't know us. Margaret thought about all the answers she could give, about Jacob and Clara, about the letters and the legacy, about how close she'd come to dying in this very house before strangers became family. But in the end, she settled for the simplest truth. Because someone was kind to us once, and kindness is the only thing worth passing on. Later, after the visitors were settled and the house had quieted for the night, Margaret stood at the window watching snowfall. Tom found her there, as he often did. You thinking about Emma? Always, but also about everything that came after, about how much pain led to this. You regret any of it? She considered the loss of her first husband, her daughter's death, the desperate flight west, the brutal winter, Garrett's attack, every moment of terror and grief that had brought her to this room, this life, this family built from fragments and determination. No, I wish Emma had lived. I wish we hadn't suffered. But I can't regret the path that led here because here is where we belong. Tom kissed her forehead. Jacob's last letter said the treasure was the chance to build something that lasts. He was right, but it's more than that. The treasure is everyone who helped build it. The people who chose to stay when leaving was easier, who chose kindness when cruelty made more sense. A sound from Emma's room. Margaret went to check, found her daughter sitting up, frightened by a dream. She gathered the girl close, singing softly until the fear passed. When she returned to the main room, the stranger's children were asleep by the fire, safe and warm. The years ahead would bring more challenges, droughts and early frosts, new settlers and old feuds, sickness, accidents, the ordinary tragedies of life. But they would face them together, this patchwork family bound by choice rather than blood. And on cold nights, when the wind howled down from the mountains and snow buried the roads, travelers would see the lights of the Warm House glowing on the hill. They'd know that somewhere in the darkness, a fire still burned, a door stood open, and love, stubborn and fierce and unbreakable, waited to prove that warmth could survive any winter. Margaret Hartwell had set out for Oregon and found home in Montana, had lost everything and gained more than she'd dreamed, had defended a broken house until it became whole, and in doing so discovered that houses were just walls until people made them mean something. The stove crackled, snow fell soft outside, and in the heart of Dust Creek Hill, Jacob Whitmore's dream lived on, not as a monument to the dead, but as a living promise that even in the coldest, darkest places, someone will always fight to keep the fire burning.